So,
Talking to me?
sure. So,
You talking to me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you. So, in terms of like, where do you put more of your focus when it comes to the hierarchy of measurement tiers?
Yeah, I think you've done a nice job here of capturing kind of the different tiers. I'm sure other consultancies and measurement companies have a different way to look at it, but essentially, it's hard to show up to work and say, I'm going to increase market share today. I'm going to increase retention by 3 days today by sending a few emails. So I think you got to obviously hold those up and actually have real data. So if it's Wolters Kluwer for retention, or if it's some sort of Millward Brown tracking, or some data source or tracking vendor that is once again longitudinally looking at changes over time, that's a good thing. But you got to look. I think as I look down your hierarchy, the marketing programs kind of set the program level goals. So. If it is retention, then obviously there are things in place in retail pharmacy, specialty pharmacy, CRM, maybe an office that are programmatically trying to move people, and they're addressing barriers and motivators to retention, and you can kind of get your hands around that. Then you get down to the level into the communication metrics, and that is actually where you get to how many registration forms were filled out, how many copay enrollments did we have, how many web visits, how long were they on site, and once again, that gets, it's in the weeds, but that's all part of the puzzle. And I think you need all three, certainly during the business planning process, whether it's annual, 3-year, or 5-year in your company, you're setting the big goals, and you want to put big stakes in the ground. The next one is, let's put a couple building blocks in place, and then within those building blocks, what are the kind of the very granular things that we need to do, because otherwise you don't know where you stand. I mean, if you say we want, more copay enrollment, that's great, but you need to say we want 10,000 registrants by mid-year, and we're going to do that by putting the form online and having a media plan that's going to drive 50,000 people, because we know roughly only 1 in 5 are going to fill out that form and complete it. So it's kind of working backwards, but that's really the only way I've seen that you can actually do it. You can't go in and wish that your market share goes up 2 points.
And so, Kelly, do you think working backwards is
Nobody's going to tweet that?
It was genius,
All
Joe.
right, I'll work on some better material.
Yeah. So I know you've spoken about. I know you've spoken about from a global branding standpoint. It's really about market share. It's really about the units sold, and focusing on those metrics rather than a little bit more on the tactical side and building from the ground up.
And frankly, that's an organizational situation that is dictating that, because from the global perspective, I work in a team that is not able to, as I think I mentioned before, do tactics at the country level. So we're setting the global strategy for the brand and what the online piece of that would be. And then I work with the countries or the regions to implement and roll out localized versions of that. And then the country takes over from that point and looks at some of these metrics and the points and how successful they're going to be. I mean, yes, we have to boil that up and say, how is this really going to drive our market share? How can we turn this into success? And before we even get to the point of rolling it out at the country level, we need to think back to Dennis's point. What are we trying to do? How can we measure it? Defining what is success, and when will we know success has been reached? What's the end point? What's the start point, and so forth? So I work on tactics and developing strategies that would work in these different sorts of environments and help them to get rolled out.
And just like Dennis is trying to create a culture of innovation, I think there's a culture of accountability that goes along with this stuff. You don't just show up and say all of a sudden you want to start measuring things,
right?
Because there's resources involved. A lot of times you're spending ridiculous amounts of money to measure things. But if you're going to invest $25 million in television, spending $500,000 to measure that and kind of predict what it's going to look like in 2 years is, to some people is a lot of money. But if you're informing over 2 years a $50 million spend, it's really not a lot of money. So part of it is scale, but part of it is you want to have. I was going to say a culture of measurement, but it really isn't that. The goal is to be accountable to your tactics. And 25 years ago, we could spend money, and like John Wanamaker said, he doesn't know which half is wasted. You can't get away with that anymore, and nor should you. I think people need to be accountable for spending. You don't do television because you want to go on the shoot in Brazil. You do television because it educates your patients, it helps the doctor manage appropriate patients, and it also may even have a lift on retention, and it kind of hopefully also broadens the market for you. You don't do CRM because you have a database company. You do CRM because you obviously want a longer-term relationship with that person and help them through their journey as a patient. So it is being accountable to your investment, to the company as an employee of the company or a shareholder in the company, and to your stockholders, that you are investing the resources of the company wisely. So this is one way we prove that.
So it sounds like there's a level of corporate accountability, corporate citizenship with respect to driving the cost down. There seems to be a little bit of a gap where customer retention acquisition meets market share and may meet communication goals and tactics. Who's responsible for bridging that gap in the middle?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So is that indicative of perhaps a model shift that needs to happen in pharma marketing, where they are much more connected and much more aligned from a brand and tactical side?
Yeah, I mean, once again, if you work on a big brand, you have a big team. I manage about 10 or 11 different agencies. We have an insights group that does a lot of primary research. We have a secondary data group. We have a competitive intelligence group. And then we also have what we call promotion response analytics. And the promotion response analytics are kind of the people that live more in the middle. I'd say the agencies and partners like that are doing more of the communication level tracking, particularly the online tactics. In the middle, you have people either in-house at pharma or contractors that do a lot of the number crunching. And even when we get program metrics in from, say, Catalina or somebody like that, we always have internal people that are double checking that and auditing to make sure that their assumptions are aligned and the data's aligned. So it's a team effort. I mean, it certainly, once again, that culture of accountability means that senior management holds people accountable for their investment. But that means, as a brand manager, I need to hold my agencies accountable. I need to hold, Catalina or whoever, some of our other partners. And there's this weird objectivity. It's not weird, but there's a certain kind of objectivity that even your internal people practice, whether they're insights people or analytics people, and that the dirty marketing people are going to spin it, or they're going to twist it, or they're going to kind of somehow put it in their favor. And I think any marketer today would be kind of foolish to do that because it's so transparent. Plus, I want to know the truth. I mean, because if I'm twisting around so that everything I do looks good and it's always positive, A, I'm not going to learn. B, I'm going to be wasting money, and C, I'm probably doing a disservice to my customers. So I think it's important to know the truth, because if you don't know where you are, you don't know kind of how to get out of that and get to a better place.
Thank you. So I think one of the trends that I'm seeing, and that was discussed a lot today, is really around patient empowerment, patient access to data, to information, being able to take control of their healthcare and wellness. Is there a need to shift the model a little differently so that we actually have the communication goals, the response, the actual behavior of patients in response to medications drive, at the end of the day, the transactions and market share?
I think that would be the ideal, to communicate with our patients and educate them, recognizing that, and I was at a conference recently, that the patient doesn't want to be on our medications. We have to realistically look at the patient and the relationship that we have with them and address it in an open and honest way. And I think that when we do that, and when we're able to really have interactions with them and engage them, then ultimately that will lead to a better relationship and brand loyalty and really market share and new RXs, continuing therapies, and so forth, because we are having a more open engagement.
And it's an iterative process. I mean, you don't want to set goals you can't reach for the most part. I mean, we do, but you're not supposed to. I mean, obviously you want a stretch goal, but